All right, it appears we are live, and I am here with Eileen Eggert and Elizabeth Lynn Blackson, and we're going to be talking about this book, Spooky Space, which we've all contributed to. I talked a great deal yesterday, it was yesterday, about all the books that came out, so I'm not going to really take up much of the time. I'm going to leave it to you two, but let's just start first with each of you sort of introducing yourself and kind of where you're coming from, what kind of things you do. So we'll start with Eileen. You want to go?
Okay. I'm Eileen Eggert. I'm from New Jersey. Hobbies include music, dressing like a pirate.
Why don't you talk a little more about that? Because I know, and Elizabeth I think knows now, but why don't you talk a little about, because I think the viewers are going to find that very interesting.
I'm in a sea shanty band called the Sea Dogs of New Jersey, and we sing sea songs and sea shanties, and we dress like pirates when we're doing it. But we're also a living history group, so we try to be as authentic as possible and bring around lots of display items, nice nifty guns and stuff, and treasure. So that's always fun.
Oh yeah. And so what about your writing? What are you into for writing?
Science fiction, primarily. I don't really do a lot of horror. I leave that to my husband. He's horrific enough for the both of us.
Okay. So Elizabeth, why don't you talk a little bit about your other writing and whatever else you want to tell people about your life?
Okay. Well, I think the biggest thing in the writing is something you've probably heard of, a trilogy of books called The Suffering Sequence, published by Tales of Wonder and Dread, edited by the fantastic, adorable, kind Gary Hill.
Okay, I'm blushing now.
Yeah, right. The first of those came out, what is it, a year and a half ago now? More than that.
Yeah, it was just a little. It was July of last year.
Right, and I should say that first book, A Girl's Gotta Eat. This microphone was purchased for the sole purpose of turning that into an audiobook, which is in progress. 24 and a half of 25 chapters recorded.
All right,
so close. The second book in the series, called Old Black Water, came out earlier this year. And it's both the books are getting really good reviews from people who have read it. Still trying to get the word out on those. And the third book is coming out last day of November. Is that right? This year?
Yeah, that's the plan.
And that is the third and last finished book in the series, which should finish the story to a particular level. And that one's called Invasive Species. Besides that, I've got a whole pile now of short stories in collections that you've done, and I've done some writing for role-playing games, Margaret Weiss Productions, and let's see here, what else? Some small press comic stuff. Decades ago, I was a colorist on a comic strip online called Bruno the Bandit. What else? I was in the Air Force for 6 years as a programmer, which is how I ended up in the St. Louis area. I'm originally from Ohio. And in my spare time, I'm a nerd. And in my regular time, I'm still a nerd. So
I think that probably applies. I know it applies to me. I can't speak for but I think we probably wouldn't be doing these kinds of books if we weren't at least to some degree nerds.
Right. I would say that I'm way more horror than science fiction in the case of Spooky Space. But part of what I did with Margaret Weiss Productions was working on the Serenity role-playing game, which was based on the movie Serenity from the television series Firefly, which has some space crunchiness, but not much. I think Joss Whedon said science makes him cry. So, whereas my short story in this collection, I think, has a fair amount of science.
Yeah, so I would think it's more of a hard science fiction almost. In fact, it probably qualifies as hard science fiction. I tend not to write hard science fiction myself.
Mm-hmm.
It tends to be a little more towards the fantasy end of things, but yeah, I think yours definitely is. As long as we're on that, as long as you said everything you wanted to say about your bio type stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Wait. Very important. I have 2 cats. Okay, now I'm done.
I also have 2 cats.
That is important.
See?
Yeah. All right. So, as long as you brought up your story just now, why don't you go first in talking about your story in this book?
Okay. It's called Tales of a Tin Can Ape. No, that's fine. Tales of a Tin Can Ape, and it was inspired. I guess the seed of it came from a song that I'd listened to recently called Kotokushi, which Kotokushi means the lonely death, which is sort of the idea of this horrible story you hear where someone dies and no one finds the body for months because no one's looking, no one cares, and that horror of not only dying, but dying and no one even noticing that you had passed. That was the beginning of it, and then it started to become all the horrible ways that lonely space, 52 astronomical units away from the sun, all the ways you could die and no one would even know it. So it was that living on the very edge of almost destruction, scraping for existence, and then ultimately the horror of the things that really terrify you that you didn't even know could terrify you, I guess. There you go. That's what it's about. Simply put, in a nutshell.
And terror, like you said, terrors that the person doesn't even realize are terrors.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you would probably consider that one more science fiction, but there are definitely terrors to it.
Yes,
No
it's very fear-based. The fears are all real-world things, but I don't think that bans something from being a horror story.
No, I don't either. And I was going to say, it kind of ties into what Eileen was talking about in a way, because you've got space pirates in it too.
Yes, and a discussion about how these people trying to do the piracy are in the same position as the first person narrator, in that they're just scraping to survive and doing it out of necessity. So
yeah, so I thought that was kind of a neat little tie-in with it. So Eileen, why don't you talk about your story then?
Okay, it's called The Dead Planet, and it's about a nearly 6,000-year-old alien traveling through the universe, and he arrives at what he thinks is an extinct planet. Just nobody living there because of a war that happened, and he thinks that the population all got wiped out. And he lands, and he explores, and he finds out they didn't all get wiped out, but they're being re-wiped out one at a time, disappearing, and he's got to try to find out why.
Okay, that's pretty good on that. And as I said in the introduction to the book, there is a monster in there.
Yes, there is.
It qualifies. I think that one is definitely science fiction, but it qualifies as horror as far as I'm concerned, because when you bring a monster into it, you kind of get that horror element automatically.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Which brings up another point. One of the things I talked about in the introduction is there was a piece written a couple of years ago by a lady who suggested that you cannot have horror in outer space. It's not possible. And then someone else did a rebuttal of that and said everything in space, every story in space is horror.
Mm-hmm.
Eileen, where would you fall on that? How would you feel about it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, horror in space is a thing. It's totally a thing. Countless episodes of Doctor Who, Star Trek. I mean, like all this stuff. They're in space. Bad things happen. Bad, horrible things.
Yeah.
And how about you, Elizabeth?
I think a lot of the tropes that are native to horror are also native to science fiction. The biggest thing that I recognize in sci-fi and horror as a crossover is the sort of haunted house or closed set, I guess. And yeah, we're getting comments. Beth Hillary says Alien.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Alien, yes. And don't forget Event Horizon.
Yes, Event Horizon. But that thing where you're trapped in a haunted house in most horror movies, but a ship is the same as a house. It's the same. When you're stuck in an environment, you can't simply leave. We cut away. I mentioned this in another interview. I think the Thing, or the Thing from Outer Space, the isolated research lab in the middle of the Antarctic. It's the same thing. You're in a location you can't just get up and walk away from. So,
yeah,
I think science.
The isolation is even worse in space than it would be in a haunted house, because in a haunted house there is a chance to find a way out and get out and get somewhere else.
Right.
You can't do that in space. I mean, Alien, okay, you got a lifeboat, but that's basically it. You know?
Right. And that is a horror in and of itself. Is you're isolated. You have a finite resource, and there is no other civilization or people to come and help you. You're on your own.
And imagine how tiny an escape pod would be in space. I mean, it would be, and even if it does have a homing beacon signal, what are the odds somebody's going to find that and be able to get to you? You know?
Imagine just being in a house with the doors locked, like, during pandemic, when it was like, I'm just really sick of everybody and the way they breathe, and like, they're walking wrong, and it's bothering me. So that whole like thing where everything starts to become an annoyance of the people around you, and that as a psychological add-on to the whatever else monster or fungus or space vampire or flying bath mat or space broccoli or whatever.
Well, and the other thing is, you don't touch on it really in your story, because, in fact, neither of them do, because with your story, there's only one person. The ship's only designed for one person. But in reality, the odds are, if you've got a spaceship, you've probably got several people on board, and they're on board for a reason, because they perform specific functions. Which means, as annoyed as you get with these people, you're also reliant on them for your survival. Yeah. So it's it would create a really unusual dynamic, I think.
What are you looking at?
Oh, I'm trying to figure out what Beth was about here.
I heard that. I don't remember which comment I made.
I don't either. It just popped up there, and I wasn't sure what that went to. Maybe she'll put something else up and explain.
We're waiting for you, Beth. What are you doing? Come on, you're part of this conversation now, I guess. Beth is a friend of mine, and by the way, you mentioned Doctor Who. Beth is an enormous Doctor Who and Star Trek fan, and I go over to her house and get caught up on the latest Star Trek, and not quite caught up on Lower Decks yet. So it's a slow savoring thing with that series.
Oh.
Space Broccoli.
Space Broccoli.
We got into a conversation once about, I remember watching an episode of Doctor Who when I was a kid on PBS on a crappy little 15-inch black and white TV screen. And I said, I swear to God, their effects were terrible. There was one episode of Doctor Who and they had like Space Broccoli as the villain. And she knew the name of it. She knew the, everything. I'm like, yes, that's it.
Yeah, it's Space Broccoli on the Powerpuff Girls.
Yeah.
See, you don't man. Space broccoli's not funny. Space mushrooms not funny. Those things are terrible.
Dangerous.
I'm a huge Doctor Who and Star Trek fan as well, and I love those old 70s ones. But you're right, the effects, the costumes were. Let's put somebody in a rubber suit and
spray painted silver. That's good.
Yeah.
But the thing is that there's a point where it's just like, look, we have a limited budget. We have to do with what we can. If it means making stuff out of cardboard, just don't touch that wall. That wall will wobble really bad if you touch it.
Yeah.
So.
What was it? Frankenstein, which I've seen numerous times, was on Sven Gulli last weekend. And he pointed out the scene when they're around when they're in the mountains looking for the monster. If you look at the background, you can see it's a curtain that's painted because you can see it's got creases in it.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like even, and they had, I'm sure for the time period, they had a really big budget, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And yet they had to make do with stuff like that, and there are imperfections, and you're just going to get it. It's only so much you can do in a certain era.
There's a scene in The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, where they bring the refugees into the glittering caves with Helm's Deep, and one of the refugees touches one of the stalactites, and it wobbles a little bit. It is like, oh crap. So even like super high budget, Hollywood stuff, you get that. So
what? Let's talk about this for a little bit. Eileen, what are some of your favorite space movies and TV shows? And we already mentioned Doctor Who and Star Trek. But yeah, tell us about some of your likes in that area.
Let's see. I like a lot of the weird British science fiction stuff I saw as a kid on Nickelodeon. They would show stuff like there was. It takes place on Earth, but there's aliens causing being the baddie. So and turning everybody in this one village into stones, and children of the stones. That's really cool. Mm-hmm. And then there was the Tomorrow People, which also took place on Earth, but they eventually joined some intergalactic thing and visited other worlds and stuff. And that was a lot. That was a lot of fun. I mean, the Tomorrow People is bad, but it was fun at the time. And I like Doctor Who, have for a really long time.
Wait. Who's your favorite Doctor?
I have two, because I don't really see the old series and the new series as the same thing. Oh, okay. So Peter Davison and David Tennant.
Okay, actually, let's ask the same question for Elizabeth.
For Doctor Who?
Yeah.
Just so you know that I am a dabbler in a lot of different genres of sci-fi. I'm not a hardcore fan of any of them.
Well, do you have a favorite Doctor then?
Kind of in the same boat. I have an old favorite and a new favorite, and yeah, the new favorite's David Tennant. Everybody knows that. The old one though is Tom Baker. Tom Baker was my Doctor, and like once it changed, it's like I don't even care anymore. It's not Tom Baker.
It was really cool stories during Tom Baker too.
That's actually me too. I was Tom Baker, and then I kind of couldn't get into Peter Davison.
Right.
I got into him since, but I couldn't. But Tom Baker until David Tennant came along, and now David Tennant's my first favorite. Tom Baker's the second favorite.
I liked Christopher Eccleston, and I liked Matt Smith after. And for whatever reason, for not having cable or whatever, I fell out of Doctor Who before Matt Smith's era stopped. So that was there's like 37 now that have happened since then. Like we're just going to change Doctor Who 3 times a season. Yeah, I can't keep up. I'm old. Shit, man. I have nap time. I can't watch this show. It takes up too much of my.
So I drifted away from Eileen. Do you have some more space shows you'd like to add?
Can't think of any not right now.
Well, then how about you, Elizabeth? What are some of your favorites? Movies or TV?
I mentioned.
Go
ahead.
Wait, go ahead.
Of course, Star Wars. You got to do Star Wars. And Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the movie from the 80s, or the miniseries from the 80s. The new movie was okay, but you know.
Yeah, I loved the 80s series, and I think that's where I sort of got into it, and then read the books after.
Yeah.
And then found out about the radio play that happened before the books.
Right.
Later than that, and it's like, okay, well, what's the real there is no real version. It's Douglas Adams. What do you expect? Yeah, that's strangely, even the absurdity of it is some of the best sci-fi ever.
Yeah.
The SEP field he talks about, where it's like we couldn't make a mountain disappear, so we just painted it bright pink and had everyone ignore it. Somebody else's problem.
Douglas Adams, his humor is absolutely brilliant. It's on a completely different level than anybody else's.
Yeah.
What was it? The one I love, something like it floated in the sky like a brick wouldn't, or something like that.
Yeah.
Exactly like a brick wouldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everything about his method of writing is wonderful. You're talking about science fiction that I loved, or we loved, I guess. Along with Star Wars, Star Trek. There's a guy who made 2 movies, and I can't remember his name, and I'm sorry. He made 2 movies recently. One was called Deus Machina, and one was called Annihilation. And those 2 movies are both, or sorry, it's not Deus Machina, it's just Ex Machina. Fairly low budget in the first case, and I think a moderate budget on the second one. Those are both amazing horror sci-fi movies, and just brilliant in my opinion. Out of the gate director, and I'm keeping an eye on that guy because his stuff is amazing. I don't know if you've ever seen either of them.
I have not.
Ex Machina is about a guy who brings an employee into his secluded compound or whatever to try to determine if a woman is an AI is performing well enough to pass as a human. And the other one is Annihilation, where these scientists go into a sort of time-space distortion field, and it's really, the whole thing is sort of an analogy of looking at yourself and looking at the problems that you have and trying to break through that, sort of in a very cool, visual, weird, trippy way. So something happened. The screen moved. Come on, everybody, Star Trek with me.
I didn't leave I figured out how to hide the comment. I figured the comment has passed, so maybe we should get rid of it for a while. And it took me a while to figure out how to do that.
No.
Yeah, it's interesting. You put the little mouse over there, and this little thing comes up that says "hide."
Oh.
It took me a while to even figure out I could do that, but yay!
We got
another comment.
Oh, what do we have?
Let's see what we have.
Right. The other thing we were talking about, Beth and I went on a walk the other day, and we were talking about the wonderful joy of an ambiguous ending in a movie, where it's not spelled out cleanly, and it's not necessarily a win, where you don't know how it necessarily goes, and it leaves everything to your imagination. How kind of awesome that is. Yeah.
I personally find it a little annoying sometimes, but yet I'll write stories that way. I think it depends. It depends on how well it's spelled out. Like, 2001: A Space Odyssey. That movie really made me mad at the ending because I hadn't read the book. I eventually figured out what happened, but then again, I'm gonna make people mad, but I do not like Kubrick. I can deal with 2001. I can deal with The Shining, but I really don't care for Kubrick stuff. I think he's a little too artsy and a little too, I don't know, trippy, I guess, psychedelic.
That's absolutely a legitimate point that you can have, and I'm not going to argue it. I have feelings about Kubrick, and particularly how he did The Shining.
We'll put this one up.
Cannabis helps. Cannabis always helps.
Yeah, I think it probably might. Yeah, I haven't tried that.
Not that I've ever done cannabis.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. None of us have, I'm sure.
Let's see. What else did you want to talk about while we were here?
Yeah, I was trying to think. Anything you two can come up with that you're interested in talking about? I guess that's a big old nope.
If you could be on a starship's crew, what ship, and what position?
For me, it would be captain. And
Of course.
But the funny thing is, I'd actually want a Klingon bird of prey because I like the cloak.
Because you like the thought of your crew stabbing you in the back at any opportunity.
Well, it keeps you on your toes, doesn't it? I wouldn't necessarily have a Klingon. All right, so let's be. You guys, I think both of you know this, but I don't know that everybody watching knows this. But I actually do dress up as a Klingon and go do charity events and stuff. And I am actually the commanding officer of my ship, the IKV Talons of Honor, and so I can relate to the Klingons. But on the other hand, I don't think I'd want to have that level of paranoia all the time. So I don't think I would want to actually have a Klingon crew. But a Klingon bird of prey would be a lot of fun, especially in orbit around Earth right now. You know, you could really have some fun with that. You really only need the cloak and the transporter, and you can do a lot of things.
What's the word for mayhem in Klingon?
I don't know that one. I know other words, but I don't know mayhem. Yeah, why'd you have to come up with one I don't actually? There aren't that many.
I don't know.
I've got some friends who can speak pretty fluently, but I'm not one of them.
Eileen, do you have an answer to that? Crew, what ship and what crew position?
I don't know. I just don't.
No pressure. No pressure.
Yeah.
A space pirate ship.
Oh yeah, that'd be good.
Haven't there been some shows with space pirate ships as the main characters?
Depends on how you define pirates, but
was it Firefly? Weren't Firefly kind of?
They were.
Firefly, but
they were. They did whatever they needed to do to get the next job done. So some of them were piracy and a lot of smuggling, things like that.
There's a show called Space Pirates on the BBC, or at least there was.
Oh, nice.
Well,
No,
watch it.
Space Pirates. No.
So what about you, Elizabeth? What would be your ship and crew?
I don't know. I can imagine myself on a lot of different ships. I do like the smaller crew, questionable morality thing. It kind of appeals to me. So,
although I suppose I should be honest, if I were to have my ultimate ship that I would want, it would be the TARDIS. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Time travel also.
That's a little cheating, but okay.
Yeah.
Red Dwarf. Yes.
Red Dwarf. Yeah. I remember that show. I used to watch it once in a while. It was pretty good.
So, as this is a discussion of both horror and sci-fi, do any of you have a particular favorite in the crossing of those two particular genres? We mentioned what was it?
Alien and Event Horizon. Event Horizon. Oh my God, that movie.
Yeah. That one was one of those like, oh, this is horror.
Yeah, it's very Lovecraftian, and yeah, it's. I don't know. My wife can't get through it. She finds it boring in the beginning because it is very much a slow burn to begin with. Mm-hmm. But boy, once you get into there, it's like it has a very John Carpenter sort of feel. Because what I like about John Carpenter is how everything sort of snowballs. It doesn't seem like much at first. And then gradually it just keeps building and building. And it reminds me a little of Prince of Darkness, actually.
Yeah, there is something very similar between the two of them and some flavor that connects them. Have you ever heard of the video game called Dead Space?
I think I played it years ago. It's an old game, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I played it years ago.
That was a very good kind of crossover between kind of a sci-fi and Lovecraftian horror. Very much like that.
Somebody just brought up Killer Clowns from Outer Space. They get some points with me.
Yes,
I recently discovered that movie, and I only saw it because they aired it on Svengoolie, and I absolutely fell in love with it. In fact, I talked about it in another video thing we did that hasn't come out. That hasn't come out yet. Yeah, I love that movie. So you get some points with me for mentioning
Yeah.
Killer Clowns from Outer Space. That
Siren's
was
a
one
friend
heck
of.
of a ship too.
What's that?
That was one heck of a ship too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Siren's a friend of mine. Hey, Siren, glad you could stop in and listen to us be idiots, or me be an idiot. These people are wise and wonderful. I'm questionable.
I'm neither of those things.
I was trying to be nice.
Just be honest.
Oh, he's kind of a schlub and a fool. I mean,
Yeah.
but he does do a really good Klingon cosplay. So
there you go. Yeah, see, in fact, I don't know if you can see it, but got the old trifoil on the arm.
Did you all ever see a movie in the 80s called Life Force? It was like space vampires.
Yes.
Yeah.
I loved that movie, talking about, and I don't know, I mean, it had to be considered horror, but it was almost pushing the edge of the sort of campy Evil Dead level of horror in some spots where it's like, whoa, I'm laughing way too hard for this to be a horror movie. Speaking of also, Jason X, one of the Friday the 13th movies, was Jason in space as a cyborg, which was, I watch a lot of bad horror sci-fi. I'm sorry.
Leprechaun in space?
What's that?
Leprechaun in space?
Oh, I haven't seen that one.
Yeah.
Oh, I gotta see that now.
I've only ever seen the first Leprechaun movie.
Oh.
And I've seen all the Friday the 13th through Jason Goes to Hell, but I've never seen Freddy versus Jason or Jason X. I've heard horrible things about Jason X, but
Jason X is absolutely horrible. Freddy versus Jason, I loved.
Oh yeah, Ren and Stimpy.
Oh,
I don't remember the episode specifically, but yeah, probably. That's old. Siren, you're old. Unlike me, I'm a spring chicken.
Yeah, we're all very young, you know.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, very, very young. This gray hair is fake. There's a line I actually have in one of the books where someone says they're a spring chicken, and the response is, people who use the phrase spring chicken are not spring chickens. Only old people use that phrase. Oh, okay, well, damn it. All right. Anything else we want to talk about? Favorite fried foods?
Hey, we can get to that in a minute, but I guess I should actually talk a little bit about the other stories that are in here, in case somebody hasn't seen the other thing that I did yesterday. I've got two stories in the book. I've got a story called The Stars, which I decided to do a classic Lovecraft story, but do it in space. Now, this one I published a couple of other times. And what is, I hope, worked on it, although I'm giving it away now, is that the beginning of the story reads very much like a typical, space science fiction battle type thing. And then suddenly it takes a completely Lovecraftian twist. And you find out that Cthulhu's been speaking to someone in dreams and telling them what to do. And Earth is doomed if they follow what this person is saying to do, and everybody's trying to follow it. So, and one person's trying to stop it. So that I thought was kind of an interesting story. And my other story in here is called Prelude to War. And I don't even remember exactly how it happened, except that I was coming up with some fresh takes on old fairy tales. And then I got thinking, what if you took some old public domain stories and, sort of expanded on them? And I got the bright idea to merge H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds and Lovecraft's The Color Out of Space, and figured out how to do a prologue that's a prologue to both of them. Gives the Martians more motivation than Wells gives them. And they're not necessarily exactly the bad guys that Wells painted them out to be. And it also explains why we don't find anything on Mars now. So I kind of put that together, and I'm kind of happy with the way that turned out. The funny thing is, it's almost all dialogue, which I don't usually write like that, but I thought it was appropriate for this. And then I closed out the book with Lovecraft's The Color Out of Space, because I thought that would be appropriate. I could have put War of the Worlds in there, but that would have just dominated the book. So the ones long enough. But so those are the other stories in there. Oh wait, no, we need to talk about one other. Dustin didn't make it to this event, but Dustin Ernest has a story which I printed before, and it's in here, and it's called, the one in here he has is Blood from Another Planet, which is vampires in space. So it's not the kind of vampires we think of. It's a different sort of vampirism, but yeah, vampires in space. Those are all the stories in the book. So that's that. Fried foods, huh?
No, whatever. I was just throwing out things to gab about. What's your greatest fear about going into space? If you could do it, if you could, like, minus, I guess maybe the ship blowing up, which is the obvious one.
It would all depend on what type of ship you're in. I mean, what sort of
a big creepy one.
A big creepy one, Event Horizon.
Yeah, one that looks like a cathedral. You know, just...
Well, that would be horrifying in and of itself. I guess, you know, the whole isolation would be a problem. I mean, not that the isolation from, you know, contact with people wouldn't be necessarily the worst part. The worst part is that if something goes horribly wrong, there is no one who can come help you. You're done. That's it. You know, you gotta survive or not. There's no backup plan here. That would be it for me, I think. What about you, Eileen?
Geez, my biggest fear about going into space would be just it's too outside of the house-y. So
I can relate to that.
That's like, fair.
It's you know, I'm not that adventurous.
Just imagine that it is your house and goes into space.
If it was my house, then I can't think of anything I'd be afraid of.
How about you, Elizabeth?
I'm not even afraid of sudden depressurization.
Well, at least that would be quick.
Yeah, I think I touched on it earlier, where it's like you get to the point where you can't stand the way people breathe or chew or whatever. Just I'm afraid that, you know, that whole space crazy, I would be the one going space crazy. Everybody else would be fine, but I would be, you know, plotting. I would be building a murder robot and, you know, really unhealthy.
It's a good hobby.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it keeps me busy, works your hands.
What I was going to say about the space house thing, now, I'm a little bit different than a lot of people. I can very much get by without ever going outside. If it was like a Star Trek starship, I would be perfectly happy to live my entire life on that ship.
Oh, yeah.
They've got a bowling alley, I mean.
You've got food. The climate is completely controlled. You can make sure there are no bacteria in the air. You can, you know, make sure there are no insects wandering around. I would be absolutely happy to live my whole life on one of those ships. You know, I know a lot of people love the great outdoors. Not me. I hate it.
Yep.
Have you seen the series Lower Decks, the Star Trek Lower Decks?
I tried to watch a few episodes. It was a little too little kid cartoony for me. I think I watched the first 2 or 3 episodes, and it just I had enjoyed what they were doing with it, but I thought it was just a little too cartoony for my taste.
There's a scene where the characters are walking down the hallway, and like the captain of the ship is possessed by an ancient power of some sort and is hovering around with like lightning coming out of her eyes, and they're just ignoring it because it's just like another Thursday to them, you know. And I was thinking, you know, the whole, oh, it's safe, there's no bugs, there's no germs. Like, no, there's occasionally, you know, you phase through a bulkhead and you die, or, you know, you get taken over by a space thing, or you get nanites up your nose, or, you know, one of a million things that could happen.
Or the Borg could show up and assimilate you.
They cut that piece of the ship that I was in. I was on the toilet. They just sucked me right on.
Again, depressurization. It's going to be over fast.
Oh yeah.
No, they'll seal the bulkheads and stuff. The most embarrassing way to die is being turned into a Borg drone while you're in the middle of, you know, capping or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think to me, the most horrifying things in science fiction shows, like the big science fiction shows.
Mhm.
I think the Borg and the Cybermen are the most horrifying because they can take your identity away and turn you into one of them. And it's like, that is worse than being killed, you know?
Yeah.
Daleks are just going to exterminate you, but they're going to, or the Daleks might enslave you, but they're not going to,
Yeah.
you know, you're still going to be you at least.
What about the earworm, like the Star Trek 2?
Oh, yeah.
Your ear and you lose all control.
Yeah,
or
that one's pretty bad too.
Yeah, or pod people where, you know, you get slurped and the next thing you know, there's a plant person copy of you and you've been turned into mold or whatever.
But at least you're dead at that point.
Yeah, well, I mean, okay, that's fair.
I mean, you don't have to experience that. I mean, I have to wonder if you become a Borg or you become a Cyberman, how much of is there still a part of you in the back that knows what's going on and is basically screaming, you know, I can't do anything about this. I'm stuck here. My body and my brain are being used against me. And
yeah, locked inside the animal that keeps doing horrible things that you're not telling it to do, and you get to witness and sense all of that. Imagine the joy of that.
Yeah,
hang on, I need to write a story.
You think about it, we sort of saw both of those. We saw it with the Borg because with 7 of 9 and with Locutus, neither one of them could have been brought back if their consciousness wasn't there to some degree before. And they still had memories of everything that happened. So they obviously knew somewhere in there that what was going on and were just unable to do anything about it. And with the Cybermen, there was one where with David Tennant, when they had one of the Cybermen down, and it was a woman who was on her wedding day, and she couldn't understand what was going on. So her identity was still in there too, you know. So you really have to. And what he did in that instance was got rid of the emotion eliminator, so they all knew what had happened to them, and they wound up dying, you know, because they couldn't live with it.
Yeah.
So you know there is something of the human in there, and that's just got to be horrific.
Yeah.
It's just like, I think that you haven't seen the Capaldi stuff, right, Elizabeth?
No.
I think there's going to be you mind a little bit of a spoiler.
Light spoilers. I might get around to seeing it soon enough.
So. This is probably a little too much of a spoiler, I think.
Then don't do it. Jeez, dude.
I'm not going to. Just the ending of one of the companions was, in my mind, the most heart-wrenching of any of them, and it was one of Capaldi's companions. But yeah. Anyway, although one of the things Moffat used to love to do, which always annoyed the hell out of me, is if you watched with the Moffat era, and this isn't a huge spoiler, pretty much nobody ever stays dead for very long. They always come back somehow and with a happier ending, which to me negates the sacrifice and negates the emotional impact of them being taken out in the first place.
Right. It's the X-Men problem. The first time I experienced this in life is why I call it the X-Men problem. Jean Grey got killed, and it was this big emotional thing. And then she popped up again, and it's like, oh, she's alive. And it's like, wait, no, that's not really her. That's somebody faking her. And then the real one came back, and then she died. And then the daughter came back, which she didn't have except in an alternate timeline, and she got killed. And then she came back, and that one came back. And then you have two of them. And I'm just like, Jesus, just no, stop. Just stop. I don't care. Stay dead. Okay, your name is Phoenix. Damn it! Oh, right.
And then you did see a lot of the Matt Smith stuff. So this was Moffat era. We had Rory, who was the Kenny of Doctor Who. I mean, it was like he was constantly getting killed and coming back.
Oh my God, you killed Kenny!
Yeah, exactly.
There was a low budget movie that was made called the Gamers, what was it? I can't remember. There were 3 Gamers movies, and then the second one, this guy was playing a bard in a D&D game, and he had a stack of characters, and it's just like, oh, you killed me, and another one would literally jump like out of frame into frame, like, haha, I'm alive again, and then he just shot by an arrow, fall over, and they finally used the bodies, the pile of dead corpses, as a shield. It's like, okay.
Well, and you know, and like I said, that when you have them brought back, it negates the entire emotional impact of him dying. Which I remember when I put out Wizard Song, and one of the characters gets killed, and several people who read it said they were hoping he would come back to life. And I'm like, but you lose the entire emotional impact. Mm-hmm. So what I've actually been doing, because I'm working on the sequel to that, have been for like 2 years now, but is I decided to do some flashbacks with that character, so at least the people who like that character can see some more of that character, but I'm not actually bringing him back to life. So, but you know, to me, it seems like a cheat to bring someone back to life after you put the reader or the viewer through that sort of emotional thing, and it also lessens the threat, because you know any of the characters that you like are going to wind up coming back anyway. I've noticed that with Star Trek Discovery. I only watched part of the second season, all of the first season, and I noticed they have had a habit of doing that, and it annoyed me too.
Did you watch this series, the television series of Game of Thrones?
No, I did not.
Okay. One of the things I loved about it was that it was brutal in killing off characters, and no one came back until someone did. And I'm not sure if I like that, because suddenly hang on, what's this say?
This is great. I like this.
Yeah, exactly. I've thought about like funerals in the Marvel universe ought to be more just like, you know, get-togethers. Oh, it's nice to see you again. Who's dead? Weren't they here like last week? Oh, they'll be back next week. Don't worry about that. Which version from which universe are you? Are you the one that went crazy and destroyed the entire? No, you're the good one. Okay.
Yeah, but you kind of expect that in comic books. I kind of think
it's a license issue, and it's only a license issue where it's like we have to keep these characters active, or they're going to fall into public domain, and it's like they're not good characters. Let them fall into.
Yeah.
People think like, you know, Batman's a great character. It's like, I'm sorry, Batman's a crap character with 100 good writers who have layered stuff into him. There were 1,000 characters like Batman. There were 1,000 characters like Superman, and it's like, come on.
But to be fair, Batman was, I mean, yeah, okay, there were some things like the Phantom, I think, came before Batman, but Batman was kind of the model on which a lot of them were built.
The Scarlet Pimpernel. Batman is the Scarlet Pimpernel. He's a rip-off character. I'm sorry, he is.
I didn't know about the Scarlet Pimpernel. I've heard the name before.
He's a wealthy elite who goes around dressed up in he plays like a fop kind of character. He's just I'm a complete idiot, but he's a great, you know, dashing hero, wears a mask, you know, goes about doing adventurous stuff.
When did that date back to?
Oh geez, that's like, I don't even remember, but it's old. Look it up. It's a novel, so it might have been like late 1700s, something like that. Wow. Superman, there was a novel called The Gladiator that was about a guy who could run fast and jump a tall building and was bulletproof and things like that, from Kansas, from a small town in Kansas. And it's like, there's nothing new under the sun.
Well, and on the other hand, I've often said this, all art is built on the art that came before it. And what some people have a lot of problem understanding that, and they're like, oh, you ripped this off. Yeah, but what did they rip that off from?
Yes.
I mean, you know, that's just sort of how it works anyway. And like Doctor Who in the 70s, I remember listening to a lot of the writers talking about it, and they basically took old Greek mythology and stuff and rewrote it into Doctor Who episodes. that's just the way it's always been done. I guess it's a matter of which ones did it better, but
right, and it's entirely about the execution. So
yeah, and I think Superman. I have issues with Superman as a character just because he is too indestructible. He's too infallible, and it kind of takes some of the risk out of it and some of the danger out of it. Mm-hmm. They have come up with ways to get around that, kryptonite, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
Then there was the whole Doomsday, but then, of course, he came back.
Wait, what? A superhero came back from the dead?
Yeah, isn't that weird?
That's super weird.
Yeah, that never happens.
We should have a poll or a tally or whatever and say, like, how many times has this person died? At 36 times. That's pretty good. You get a free sub after like 10, right? So,
I bet you if you Google it, you can find out. There's probably a list out there.
Someone has lists out there, of course.
I would bet on it. Wow, we really covered a lot of interesting stuff here.
Wandered all over the place.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about that. Favorite comic book characters then.
Sci-fi horror or just in general?
In general.
It's going to take me a minute. Eileen, I'll let you go first because I am steeped in comic books. It's going to take me a minute.
All right. I like pointy-eared cartoon characters. So, Nightcrawler.
Nice.
Just about anybody from ElfQuest.
Nice.
Very cool. I love Nightcrawler. I was introduced to him. I was probably 13, 1983. So at 12, with a run where he was, what was his name? Paul Smith was the artist. And the whole comic book was not action and fight scenes. It was just a little slice of life. And he was having a date, and he was curled up on a sofa, like stretched out kind of. And he had a little stuffed Nightcrawler, the little Bamf character that came from Kitty Pryde's fairy tale. So that was my intro to Nightcrawler, and I have loved him since.
Nice.
Do you have an opinion of Nightcrawler, Gary?
Yeah. I always liked that character. It's funny because I'm older than both of you, I think. And so I remember when the X-Men were the other X-Men before they started introducing all those characters. And so I remember when he was a brand new character, and I thought he was pretty cool. I liked him right from the start. I don't know that he was I was not as big an X-Men fan as I was some other comics. My favorite superhero team was the Defenders, but the original Defenders. Mm-hmm. I think Doctor Strange is probably my favorite Marvel character.
Wasn't the Defenders Doctor Strange, Silver Surfer, Submariner, and the Hulk?
Yeah.
It was like the big hitters.
I don't remember the Surfer being around a lot, but Valkyrie was one of them. And then they had to start bringing certain people in and out. And I loved some of the 70s run of the Defenders because they had so much humor in there sometimes. One of my favorite ones was when they had this big battle between, it was like all the sides. I think everybody had to get together to fight Dormammu and Loki. Mm-hmm. And afterwards, everybody came to Doctor Strange's place. And they're sitting there. And so Valkyrie and Nighthawk and the Hulk go grocery shopping. And they're going through the grocery store. And Hulk is pushing the shopping cart, and he's got it full of baked beans. And they're like, we don't need that many baked beans. And Valkyrie's like, you want to tell him? So they wound up getting all the beans.
I don't want to be around the Hulk after he's eaten 3 grocery carts full of baked beans.
No.
That's gamma radiation. I can smell it. My favorite character, I thought about it. I ran it through my processor, and I keep coming up with the same answer. Spider-Man.
Oh, I love Spider-Man, too.
My favorite since I was 2 or 3, or the 67 cartoon of him swinging along. And I'm sure I had a Mego action figure of Spider-Man. Probably.
That was the only superhero action figure I had was Spider-Man. Yeah.
See, that's how important it is.
Yeah.
I had a Spock and one other that I can't remember, and Spider-Man Mego action figures.
I had a Planet of the Apes Cornelius, and I had Spider-Man, and that was all I had. I don't know why.
That's a good sort of sci-fi horror story right there. Is Planet of the Apes, the dystopian?
Yeah, Planet of the
yeah.
Apes.
Oh, and then I also had Action Jackson, I think, and I found that you could take his head off and put it on Spider-Man. So I would do that to turn Spider-Man into Peter Parker.
Nice.
Yeah. But yeah, Planet of the Apes. Oh God, I love that when I first saw that, and then I wound up getting the book and reading the book, and they're both so different. But
I got the novel from my school library, expecting it to just have a little more information. It's like, is this even the same? Like, this is way different.
They made a lot of changes when they made it into a movie, but I like both universes. Oh, you got somebody saying hi.
Who's saying hi? Paul Atherton saying hi, Lynn. One of the things that I did for my novel series was I built a couple of the characters in a software called Hero Forge, where you can make a miniature and then have it 3D printed or get the 3D printing file. And I had Paul print the 3D file for a certain daemon in the series, and then he hand painted them. He's a very talented artist. Thank you, Paul.
Wow, wow, that's awesome.
I'm a nerd. Did I mention that earlier? I think
we've all sort of established some nerddom.
Yeah, here. Nerd cred, full nerd cred.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
They will be delivered soon. They will. They had.
But you know, as long as you know they exist.
Yeah. I mean, I'm in no particular hurry. It's not like I need them for a Saturday night D&D game or something. It's just.
How big are they? Are they?
They're what do you call them? 27, 32 millimeter, whatever. They're
nice.
D&D size.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, they look very cool, and I'm hoping to use a couple of them as a back cover photo for the third book that's going to come out in November. So it's why I'm having them made, is because somebody is planning out something very strategically and using miniatures and stuff to plot these things.
Nice. Yeah, you know what I love about your books is that I get to read them first, well, almost first.
Right. Literally, in some cases, the third book, I think 5 people maybe have read total, and that's not many. So you're way on the short list of first to read.
Yeah.
You're gonna it's gonna hurt you. It's gonna hurt your soul.
Oh. God, is it going to be as dark as the last one? No telling yet.
Oh, look, I'm just going to drink some soda here.
Because I'll tell you, that one was pretty hard to get through for a while there because I was so attached to those characters. You and I discussed it. I had to walk away from it for a little while the first time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, imagine when you're reading something and it's disturbing you so much you want to not, you have to put it down. But that gross voyeuristic, oh my God, I have to keep reading. Imagine writing something like that. It's like I'm going to hell. I'm going to hell.
It's funny, when I wrote the Homestead, I had originally envisioned some scenes that were really sort of similar, not quite as graphic as some of the stuff in Old Blackwater, but there were some much more, cruel scenes going to be in there, and I just couldn't do it. I couldn't put it on paper. I just couldn't do it. I don't know.
Before I wrote the suffering sequence, I had worked on some novels with a friend of mine, and the thought was that he would have a character and I would have a character, and the stories would interweave. And every now and then I would write stuff or suggest, hey, you could do this. And he's like, God damn, that's dark. And I'm like, yeah, that's I'm a horrible person. Did you not know that? How would it?
I disagree, but
It's my
you might
therapy.
have, you have
I
a
dump all that.
horrible imagination, but oh, trust me, you don't want to look inside here sometimes.
Oh, I do. I really do.
Oh,
I'm
no,
really
you really
curious.
don't. I can come up with far worse things than I could ever put on paper.
See, that's the thing is I think when people read horror, sometimes what they're looking for is, I've got a dark, twisted mind, and even I didn't think of that crap. What the? Thank you. Thank you. I hit a new horrible. Thank you.
Yeah. So anyway, anything anybody else would like to add on here? Chat about.
Eileen, I've talked this whole thing. I'm probably 50% of the conversations. Come on.
What?
Ladies and gentlemen who are watching this now or in the future, we're still trying to coax Eileen out of her shell. She's shy. And I have lost all boundaries and decided to just blab. Anything, Eileen?
Well, I think you had the opposite effect.
Damn it. Eileen, have you been published before, or is this your first?
Well, I had a poem in one of Gary's other books.
Yeah, that was in the Halloween one, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And other than 2 jokes in Reader's Digest, that would be it.
Whoa! I'm going to channel Frank Barone here. You were in the digest?
Oh, yeah. You know how readers send in their own little jokes and stuff?
Yeah.
And one was about New Year's resolutions. It's great. Both times I got like the last comment. I was like the punchline. I was like the big finish. So it was really cool. Like one was about New Year's resolutions, and I said all I want is for my kitten to stop stepping on my head while I'm trying to sleep. This is the kitten. And the other thing was your best one.
I think our ratings just went up with the cat going by.
Yeah, right. The other one was best. You're sending your best one-liner, and I sent. I was raised as an only child. My sister was furious.
I like that. That's good.
Very cool. And are you excited about getting published in this?
Oh yeah.
I'm hoping we're going to see more from you in the future, right?
She's already submitted one,
Nice.
which I haven't had a chance to look at yet, but to figure out where it's going to have a home. But I'm pretty confident we'll find a home for it.
Yes. So I've been writing for a really long time and have had a bad habit of not finishing things ever.
Yeah. Oh,
so I have now finished 2 stories. Hooray!
I have certainly abandoned more novels than I've finished. So.
Yeah, you don't want to look at my work in progress folder.
Right.
Yeah.
What was this again? Oh, crap. I wrote like 30,000 words of a novel and then totally lost all interest. Oh, crap.
There was I saw a video online with the it was a sort of a Q&A panel with the writers of Ted Lasso. And so they one of the a young man stood up and said that he wanted to be a writer and what advice could he give, and Brendan Hunt just said, get in the habit of finishing things. So that's what I'm gonna try to do.
Yeah. So we were talking about comics, and there was an artist, I can't remember his name, but he was sort of famous because he was a very mediocre artist, but he would finish things on short deadlines. And so it's like, something fell through. Call that guy. He will get it done. We will have something ready for print. And sometimes being reliable is better than being amazing. So
yeah, it was like you can go back and finish it later. Just get to the finish line, and then go back. But don't leave it unfinished. Get to the finish line.
Yeah, I should probably listen to that one myself.
Yeah, I thought it was really good advice because that was my biggest problem.
Yeah, that is really good advice. I think we all struggle with that, though. I think my biggest advice to people, but you guys are both well past this, is just always write. It doesn't matter what you write, just make sure you write every day.
Mhm.
Because like anything, the more you practice at it, the better you're going to get.
Yeah.
And if you're doing well at the practice part, you're going to look back at a lot of your older stuff and go, well, I wish at the very least, you're going to say, I wish I had done this differently. You know, that's the other thing is you have to know it's never going to be completely the way you want it.
Right.
You just have to get it to the point where, yes, I can put this out in the world.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with it. And it's perfectly normal. I bet you every popular writer looks back at their older stuff and, you know, looks over it and says, you know, I really wish I'd done this differently. You'll see sometimes some of them will even redo certain stories or certain books and put them back out with a new version that they're happier with. That's that's perfectly natural.
Yeah.
And you have to understand that you're never going to have perfection. Never. That's just not the human condition.
Yeah.
There's a saying, the perfect is the enemy of good enough. And it's a kind of a military saying, or where I'm familiar with it from is the military, where it's like, yeah, we could spend another 2 weeks making a perfect plan, but if you do something right now, it's going to be way more decisive and functionally better. So I'm sorry, I've got a hair in my face. Ah! To do this interview, I had the air conditioning turned off because the vent is right beside me and it will blow loudly. So my bedroom is about 89 degrees right now, and I'm sweating, and everything is just like.
We should wrap this up so you can get into some air conditioning.
Please.
Yes, I hate heat. I would not want to go through that. So we'll go ahead and wrap this up then. Thank you both for being here, and thank you folks who've been commenting and you know, everything. We're glad you were here. The book is Spooky Space, Creepy Otherworldly Tales, and it was published yesterday. And I've run down some of the stories in it. I was going to say too, this video is going to remain out on the Facebook page, but also I'll add a little beginning bumper and ending bumper. And a week from this Saturday, it'll go up on the Spooky Ventures YouTube channel as a feature. So it'll be both places. But you can get the book at lulu.com/spotlight/strange sound. Or if you go type in talesofwonderandread.com, it takes you to the Tales of Wonder and Dread section of GaryHillAuthor.com, and you'll find it there. Or just GaryHillAuthor.com, and you can navigate to the Tales of Wonder and Dread section and maybe find some other cool stuff there that you like. And so that's it for this time. Thank you guys for being here. And again, thanks everybody for tuning in. And we'll see you later. Bye. Spooky Ventures is the home for spooky content and spooky merchandise on the web. Check it out today at spookyventures.com. And remember, always keep it spooky.